The first thing anyone heard was someone from HR saying, "This is everything she left." The words drifted down the hallway in a low, uncertain murmur. Then another voice answered, quieter. "Just the one USB. Nothing else." I wasn't there to see it happen, but I know exactly how it unfolded. People talk when they're nervous. They said the HR assistant carried the small drive between her fingers, like it might burn her skin. They said she walked straight into Michael Harrington's office without knocking, and they said he barely looked up from his laptop when she spoke. "Claire Donovan's desk is cleared," she told him. This was the only item left behind. Michael took the USB the same way he took everything else in his life. Casually, confidently. He had been regional operations director for years, long enough to believe nothing in that building could still surprise him. "Probably handover notes," he said. Then, almost amused, "Let's see what she left for Andrew." He plugged it in, clicked the file, skimmed the first page. His breathing changed before his face did. No one knows what line he reached first. Maybe it was the risk log. Maybe it was the signed warnings he'd ignored. Or maybe it was the compliance gaps that carried his son's name. What everyone remembers is the sentence that came next. His voice dropped so suddenly the assistant froze in place. "Get our best lawyer." That was all it took. One page, not even the worst one. The assistant backed out of the office, whispering that she would call legal immediately. Michael stayed where he was, staring at a screen that suddenly felt brighter than the overhead lights. A man who had ordered me, Claire Donovan, to hand over 12 years of work to his inexperienced son, now sat alone with the record of everything he had never bothered to understand. 2 weeks earlier, he had smiled and told me it was time for new leadership. 2 weeks earlier, I had nodded. Quiet. Composed. 2 weeks earlier, he believed he had replaced me cleanly. He had no idea what I had been holding together for more than a decade. And if a single page shook him like that, he was not ready for what came next. 2 weeks earlier, I sat at the long conference table with my notebook open, waiting for Michael to begin. I had been at the Northern Logistics Hub in Spokane since I was 32. At 44, I knew every inch of our cold chain system better than the walls themselves. Michael stood at the front of the room wearing that bright, polished smile he reserved for announcements meant to impress people who didn't know better. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "Today we welcome our new operations manager." My pen paused. My name had been on the short list for months. Michael gestured toward the door. "My son," he said proudly. "Andrew Harrington." Andrew walked in wearing a tailored jacket and the kind of grin that comes from believing the world is already arranged in your favor. I felt the shift before anyone spoke. He shook hands down the table. "I'm excited to bring a more global perspective," he said. "Oxford prepared me well." I kept my voice steady. "Congratulations, Andrew." Michael nodded, satisfied. "Claire," he said, "you'll handle the transition, documentation, support, anything he needs to get settled." I looked at him. "So I'm no longer managing the division." "It's not a demotion," he replied smoothly. "Just new energy." Andrew smiled. "I'm sure you'll make this easy." The meeting ended with polite clapping that sounded more like apologies than approval. As people filtered out, I gathered my notebook, keeping my hands carefully still. Behind me, Michael lowered his voice and spoke to Janice from HR. "She'll behave," he said. "She needs the paycheck." "People like her don't make noise." Janice didn't answer. She didn't need to. The sentence landed exactly where he meant it to. I walked out of the room without a word, carrying 12 years of work, and the sudden knowledge that something inside me had shifted beyond repair. When I first took over cold chain operations in Spokane, no one cared about my title. They cared that their shipments arrived at the exact temperature promised. The Columbia Basin farms, the Port of Pasco, the processing plants scattered across eastern Washington. Every one of them depended on precision. For 12 years, that precision was my responsibility. I walked inspectors through malfunctioning freezers at 2 in the morning. I stopped a near federal shutdown by catching a faulty sensor hours before it ruined an entire shipment. I saved a contract worth more than $200,000 by rerouting a truck when a driver's console failed halfway through Lookout Pass. None of those stories ever reached Michael's office. So when Andrew stepped into the role I had built from the ground up, I did what professionals do. I tried to teach him. I showed him the temperature logs. "If this number slips," I said, "the entire chain is compromised." He waved a hand. "I studied strategic operations at Oxford," he said lightly. "We focus on long-term vision, not these little fluctuations." "These fluctuations determine legality," I said. "Right," he replied, smiling as if humoring a child. "But that's administrative. My father wants innovation." Later that afternoon, I explained the structure behind our last 3 successful federal audits. "These documents look simple," I said, "but they take weeks of preparation." Andrew leaned back in his chair. "You make it sound dramatic," he said. "My professors always said systems run themselves once they're built. Only if someone maintains them." He grinned. "That's why I have you, for now." His tone was casual. The message was not. I walked out of his office knowing something I had ignored for years. Michael didn't want a functioning system. He wanted an empire that sparkled, even if the foundation cracked underneath it. And I had been the one patching those cracks for more than a decade. I was heading back to my desk when I heard Michael's voice through the half-closed door of his office. I didn't mean to stop. I didn't mean to listen. But my name caught me in place. "Claire won't complain," he said. "She needs the job to support her mother. She'll stay obedient." The words were calm, almost bored, like he was describing office furniture. Something tightened in my chest until it hurt. Before I could move, his door opened. He didn't see me. He walked past, still talking into his phone. Still certain of who I was. Still wrong. I sat down at my desk, trying to steady my hands, when an email popped up. From Andrew. Subject: Quick fixes. The compliance sheet is a mess. Could you clean this up quietly? Dad wants it by noon. A minute later, he appeared at my doorway. "I followed the template," he said. "Maybe the system changed. You'll figure it out." I pointed to the screen. "You reversed the critical limits," I said. "That invalidates an entire audit." Andrew swallowed. "Just fix it," he said quietly. "I already told Dad it was done." The fear in his voice didn't soften me. It sharpened something I had been avoiding. Richard's entitlement was loud. Andrew's panic was quiet. Both pressed in from opposite sides, assuming I would absorb their mistakes, their carelessness, their certainty that I would stay. I corrected the report, sent it back without a word. Andrew exhaled in relief, thanked me, and hurried away. And the moment he left, I understood something I had never allowed myself to admit. I had spent years believing I had no choice but to stay. For the first time, leaving did not feel impossible. 3 nights passed without rest. I tried lying down, sitting up, walking the hallway. Nothing calmed the tight, restless shaking in my chest. On the 4th morning, before the sun was fully up, I opened my laptop and typed the resignation letter I had already written a dozen times in my head. Every line was clean, precise, free of emotion, 12 years compressed into a single page. I sent it to HR at 8:45 a.m. At 8:51, the reply arrived. Approved. No meeting, no questions, no hesitation. Just that one word. I stared at it until the screen blurred. For 12 years, I had carried their crises, their failures, their signatures, and all it took to release me was 8 letters sent in less than 10 minutes. I closed the email and opened the company archive. Every risk log I had authored, every temperature deviation I had documented, every warning I had attached to Michael's inbox. They were mine. I saved them into a single, carefully organized file. It didn't feel like collecting evidence. It felt like reclaiming my own history. Then I slid a USB drive from the back of my desk drawer and copied the file onto it. No edits, no commentary, no drama. Just truth. Chronological, uninterrupted. By noon, my desk was empty. My mug, my notebooks. The pen I'd carried through 3 federal audits. I left the USB in the center of the desk where anyone clearing my space would notice it. No label, no explanation. On my way out, Janice from HR stepped into the hallway. "Claire?" she asked carefully. "Are you heading to lunch?" "I'm heading out," I said. She opened her mouth as if to say something else, then stopped. "Take care of yourself." I nodded and walked toward the elevator. Leaving behind a building I had quietly held upright for more than a decade. Some truths only matter once you're no longer there to explain them. The Monday after I left, I sat in a small cafe in Tacoma, waiting for an interview. The hiring manager, a calm woman named Rebecca Sloan, shook my hand and smiled. "Your record is impressive," she said. "We've been looking for someone who understands compliance beyond paperwork." I returned the smile. "That's the only way compliance works." We spoke for nearly an hour. When she said she'd follow up by the end of the week, I believed her. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. 3 emails had been forwarded from the shared inbox I used to manage. The first read, "Shipment failed. Temperature deviation detected. Revalidation required immediately." The timestamp was 9 minutes earlier. The second came from one of our long-term clients. "This pallet is mislabeled. Temperature path does not match the manifest. Please explain." I read it twice. Andrew had handled the labeling himself. A third email arrived moments later, from Andrew. "Claire, the software glitched. The client is upset. Do you know how to fix this?" I typed nothing. I moved the message into a folder labeled "For Review" and left it there. As I walked toward my car, another email appeared. This one from a federal address, requesting additional temperature logs for Spokane facility. Potential inconsistencies noted in recent data. I stopped walking. Of all the warnings I had ever issued, this was the one Michael always insisted would never happen under his leadership. My phone rang. Andrew's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Back in the parking lot, I sat in silence as more messages landed in the inbox. Each one a small crack widening in the system I had held together for years. None of it surprised me. Not the failures, not the panic, not the consequences finally circling back. Every ignored warning had simply chosen the same week to return. By Thursday morning, the messages had doubled. Someone finally escalated the temperature inconsistencies to the executive board. The board demanded every document tied to Spokane's recent failures. HR forwarded what they had collected from my cleared desk, including the USB. Later, a former coworker told me how the board meeting began. Michael stood confidently at the head of the table. "These are minor hiccups," he said. "Transitional adjustments." He repeated the phrase until Eleanor Price, one of the senior directors, interrupted him. "Did you review the USB?" Michael frowned. "It's irrelevant," he said. "Probably leftover training notes." Eleanor didn't argue. She plugged the drive into the conference room laptop. The room went silent. The first file opened to a timeline labeled Operational Risk Log. 10 years. Line after line appeared. Temperature deviations, email timestamps, missing signatures, Michael's name, Andrew's, no opinions, no commentary, just facts. "Did you sign this warning?" Eleanor asked, pointing to a scanned form. Michael swallowed. "It must be outdated. It's dated 6 months ago," another director said. "And you dismissed the corrective action." A second document opened. Andrew approving a shipment with reversed critical limits. The board exchanged looks that didn't bother hiding what they meant. Michael tried to speak. Eleanor held up a hand. "You told us Spokane was stable," she said. "This shows repeated negligence." "It's being handled," Michael insisted. "It is not." She closed the laptop. "Effective immediately," she said. "You are suspended pending investigation." Andrew Harrington is relieved of managerial duties. Michael leaned back in his chair. The sound of it creaking was the loudest thing in the room. The downfall he once feared wasn't approaching anymore. It had already arrived. My first week at Riverview Logistics in Bellevue felt strange in its simplicity. People asked questions before making decisions. They listened without interrupting. No one treated compliance like an inconvenience that needed to be worked around. When my new director, Patricia Lane, told me, "Your judgment is solid. We trust it," something loosened in my chest that had been tight for years. It happened on a Friday afternoon. I had just finished speaking at a small cold chain conference in downtown Seattle. Nothing flashy. Just practical discussion about risk management and systems that survive real pressure. As I stepped outside, someone said my name. "Claire." I turned. Andrew stood near the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, shoulders drawn in. He looked nothing like the confident man who once introduced himself with Oxford credentials and a practiced grin. "Can we talk for a minute?" he asked. I nodded, staying a comfortable distance away. He exhaled slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "I read the files," he said, "the ones on the USB." His eyes lifted to mine. "I didn't know," he added. "I truly didn't understand how much you carried." My voice stayed steady. "You weren't expected to understand," I said. "You were expected to lead." He nodded. "That's what I need to apologize for," he said. "Not the promotion. I know that was my father's decision, but I believed I could step into your role just because I wanted it, because he said I deserved it." He rubbed his forehead. "You built a system that worked because you were holding it. I thought it ran itself." I let the silence sit. Then he said quietly, "I'm sorry, Claire. I was arrogant. I see that now." I answered calmly, "Arrogance only made it louder." He nodded, shoulders sagging. "I hope you find a place where they value you the way we should have." I already did. Andrew looked down. He had finally seen my worth, and I was no longer standing anywhere he could take it from me. The news reached me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing a compliance draft when Patricia stepped into my office holding a printed memo. Her expression was calm, the kind reserved for information that had already settled. "It's about your former director," she said. "The investigation is finished." I set my pen down. "What did they find?" "Repeated negligence," she said. "Documented, confirmed." She handed me the memo. The board confirmed he ignored multiple risk warnings. Several contracts were nearly endangered under his son's oversight. I scanned the lines without rushing. Every sentence was something I had lived through in fragments. "They voted for permanent removal," Patricia continued. "And Andrew?" I looked up. "Temporarily suspended from managerial duties," she said. "But the more serious issues are being referred to federal review. There were too many discrepancies to keep it internal." She waited for a reaction. I only nodded. "Thank you for telling me." Later that evening, Janice from HR called. Her voice sounded strained. "They asked me to sit in the room," she said. "Michael tried to argue the files were outdated." "And?" I asked. "The board reminded him your timestamps were consistent. He couldn't deny any of it." She hesitated. "He kept saying he never expected it to fall apart like this." I answered quietly. "He built everything on the assumption no one would ever look closely." Janice exhaled. "It's over, Claire." After the call ended, I sat in the stillness of my new office. No triumph, no anger, just clarity. Truth didn't need defending once it stood on its own. Bellevue never felt like a dramatic new beginning. It felt like air I hadn't breathed in years. Quiet, steady, uncomplicated. People asked for my opinion because they wanted it, not because protocol required it. When something went wrong, no one searched for someone to blame. They searched for a solution. One morning, Patricia stopped by my desk. "You have a calm way of finding what other people miss," she said. "I hope you know we notice." "I do now," I replied, and I meant it. My days filled themselves differently. I had time to take my mother on slow walks along the lake. She forgot things often, but she never forgot to squeeze my hand. That felt more grounding than any title I'd ever held. Evenings were quiet, simple meals, no late-night emergencies, no buzzing phone. Silence settled where stress used to live. I thought about Spokane sometimes, only the parts that belonged to me. The first system I built, the audits I guided safely through, the lessons I carved into my own spine. I didn't replay Michael's voice. I didn't replay Andrew's panic. That story had finished itself. 3 months after I left, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "We rebuilt the department using your documents. We kept your structure. Your work didn't vanish. It finally received the respect it deserved." No signature, no explanation. But the handwriting told me enough. It came from someone who had watched the collapse from the inside. I folded the letter and placed it in my bedside drawer. Not as proof, as peace. Karma hadn't rewarded me by hurting anyone. It rewarded me by giving my life back. Everything I needed was already here. And if leaving gave me all of this, there was nothing behind me worth returning to.